Regina, Mater misericordiae, vita dulcedo, estes nostra salve.
The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew. Jesus said to his disciples, "Beware of false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but underneath they are ravenous wolves. By their fruit you will know them. Do people pick grapes from thorn bushes or figs from thistles? Just so, every good tree bears good fruit, and a rotten tree bears bad fruit. A good tree cannot bear bad fruit, nor can a rotten tree bear good fruit. Every tree that does not bear good fruit will be cut down and thrown into the fire. So by their fruit you will know them." The Gospel of the Lord. Beware of the false prophets. Sheep and thorns and thistle, they naturally like to go astray when left to themselves. That seems to be their nature. And so the false prophet is okay with that. The false prophet is okay with letting the sheep be untended and letting the thorns and thistle just go along their merry way. It's kind of reminiscent of a word that I hear from people when it might come into a discussion about, their faith, going to church, receiving sacraments. This is what I get in response: "I'm good. I'm good." Okay. In other words, I'm fine without that stuff. This is an excuse to be lazy and not work, doing the work of tending the field and tending the sheep. Because the easy path is to just let it go. But it's hard work to be a disciple of Christ. It's hard work to pray faithfully. It's hard work to place our sinful self under restraints. It's not easy. And yet, it seems to be the way that the lying prophets would tell us to go by. In yesterday's gospel, Jesus said, "Go through the narrow gate." The narrow gate is the way of a personal encounter, not the way of the herd. It's not the mass of sheep, and it's not the mass of soil, but it's where an individual passes individually through the narrow gate and has a personal encounter with Christ. It's where an individual assumes personal responsibility, not giving it to somebody else, assumes personal responsibility to take care of their faith and their spiritual life. It's where I take personal responsibility in living my baptismal promises. It's where I take personal responsibility on having an encounter with Christ in His Scriptures and in the Eucharist. It's where I take personal responsibility of having a fear that I might be without the Eucharist. And so I go, I receive, because I know it's the body and the blood and the soul and divinity of Jesus. It's where I take personal responsibility in laying down my life so that I can be a sheep. I can be not a goat. And it's where I lay down my life to help the mission of Christ with other sheep. It's the narrow way of faith. Abram here, he chose that narrow way of faith, going the way God asked him to. There's a couple of nuances in the book of Genesis today that reveal this. First of all, if you track Abram, he did not have an easy life. He was very rich and prosperous, but all his trouble started when he started following the Lord. It's kind of funny. But, you know, when you say I'm good, and the thorns and the thistles are overrunning your garden, and the sheep are going astray, when you say I'm good, you don't even notice it. You don't even notice how bad your life is, because you just accept that for what it is. But Abraham was willing to follow the way, the narrow way. And we're told he did this in faith. Now this is interesting in this passage in the book of Genesis. He says to him, look up at the stars of the sky and count them, and God says, if you can. Now you might say that was a reference to all the numbers of the stars, but you could also say, if you look at that scripture passage in context and read it, God took Abraham out and he had him look up at the sky during the daytime. Can you see stars in the daytime? And so it was like God was saying to him, Abraham, you know those stars are there, but you can't see them, and I'm telling you they are. If you're okay with my word on that, then you're going to be okay with my word on other things when they don't seem to make sense. Because this is the narrow way. It's the way of the Lord. It's the way of life, while others are happy to be good and unwittingly on the path to death. And so Abraham follows the way. And God says to him, just so your descendants shall be. Wow. Abraham put his faith in the Lord. Today, it would be good to take a sober look at how we're doing on the way and which way we're following.
Regina Celi, letare